Musical theater seems to be just another little niche fandom somewhere on the internet. To many, it seems that this has no bearing on their everyday lives. Theater still has its grasps on our everyday lives, even if it's a bit harder to notice for those who aren't familiar with it. When an ancient art form ascends to the internet, it's going to be very different from the previous offline iterations. But how different? Well, let's see. The first and most important thing to know about this fandom is that it's unified, meaning that while there are individual fandoms for individual musicals, for the most part it's just one big fandom. People will say that they participate in the musical theater fandom and not the insert musical name fandom. This is very different from many other fandoms, since this is the fandom that is centered around a medium, not a specific piece of media. The musical theater fandom is also very different from other fandoms because it is based on an entirely different type of media than others, musicals. This, of course, impacts what the fandom makes as well. You've obviously got your basic fan art, which is the majority of the fan-made content, fan fiction, cosplays, and so on. But there are a couple of unique things as well. One is animatics. These are storyboard-like animations, which feature scenes or songs from the musical, and on a rare occasion, the entire musical. These are present in other fandoms, but still use the audio from a musical. There are also people who collect the playbills of shows, which are sort of the programs of the musicals. And since musicals are, related to music, there are a lot of covers of songs, as well as some remixes. Another big part of the fandom is fake casting, in which you send a video of you singing and you get a role, or where you just cast people you know into roles. This fandom is also a lot more dispersed, and while there is a large amino, most of the activity is done on individual pages, such as Instagram, all linked together with hashtags such as hashtag Broadway or hashtag musical theater. Also, there is a bit of a presence on TikTok as well. It's kind of messy though. People in this fandom are referred to as theater kids, and while it is a term that technically refers to people who are interested in theater in general, most of the time they are interested in musicals. Nearly all of the longest running Broadway shows are musicals after all. Now, this isn't to say that theater kids only work in musicals, as about 3/4 of the fandom participates in theatrical activities that don't involve musicals. Oftentimes, schools that have large theater departments will have theater kids. The other term used in the fandom is musical trash, which is used to refer to people who are obsessed with musicals. This term came up around 2015, and there are also variants of the term for individual musicals. Songs with musicals are often referred to as show tunes because they are tunes in a show. Those within the fandom note that their enthusiasm may be slightly too high and that they make band kids look normal. This fandom is very diverse, with many different interests and people. But how do they all come together? Musicals have existed for a very long time, but Western musical theater, which is what this fandom is centered around, began in the 19th century. Obviously, a lot of stuff happened here, but I'm focusing on the fandom in this video, so we won't be going into that. One of the largest obstacles to the expansion of this fandom on the internet is the fact that it is not very easy to access a lot of musicals. Obviously, not everyone lives near Broadway or West End, and theaters in general aren't as common as, say, cinemas. While animatics help, a lot of them cut out the dialogue, which makes it more confusing and it doesn't really include the plot that much. There are also official pro shots or cast recordings of musicals, but those are quite rare, and you might not have the specific cast you want. So what happens? Oh, look, it's Blackbeard. Enter bootlegs. These are illegal recordings of musicals done because the FBI isn't blurring out that you wouldn't commit automotive theft at the start. These are extremely controversial within the fandom, with proponents saying that bootlegs are the only way to watch musicals for those who don't have access to live theater. They are also used to archive theater, such as productions that have gone off stage or productions with a specific cast. Opponents of bootlegs say that it's, well, illegal. They also say that it impacts the performance itself, as it distracts the actors and the audience, or that it hurts theaters financially. Despite this, there is still quite a black market going on with trading bootlegs. Public bootlegs often hide with like slime tutorial or a very bad description of the musical. Totally nothing to see here, guys. Move along, move along. Bootlegs are roughly on par with live theater in terms of use. Pro shots are greatly used, and animatics are more of a fan art instead of a method of watching theater. There are also movie musicals, such as The Sound of Music, While there are fans of these, the fandom tends to center more around the live ones. Do note that sometimes these musicals are adapted into a live one, such as Newsies. While musicals are a very large genre and can be enjoyed by practically everyone, there are quite a few patterns of who is in the fandom. For one, about 75% of the fandom is female, 15% male, 4% non-binary. About half the fandom is between 12 and 17, with the next largest groups being 18 to 24 and 25 to 34. About 60% are Americans, with the rest of them being from a very diverse range. If you add on the rest of the core Anglophone countries, Australia, Canada, UK, New Zealand, this percentage becomes about 75%. While the first musical that people saw varies greatly, the ones that were mentioned the most were, unsurprisingly, Hamilton and Wicked. A good portion of the first musicals are likely school plays for elementary or middle school. Now, the time of joining is a bit spread out, but it's mostly concentrated between 2015 to 2019. The ways to join the fandom are varied, but the most common were through a friend or family, through other theatrical activities, through a random recommendation, or through a song. People are often introduced to the fandom by more popular musicals that do have legal recordings and are easier to access, such as Hamilton, Be More Chill, Dear Evan Hansen, and Heathers. These are gateway musicals, and since these musicals apply to the preteen to young adult demographic, they draw in a lot of these people into the fandom. You'll note that 3 of these feature high school shenanigans, which creates relatability. But with such a large audience all within one fandom, people will have different preferences, and this becomes a problem when applied to the divide between classical and contemporary theater. See, this fandom has gatekeepers. Some of the fandom call the gateway musicals as basic musicals and fans of those musicals as fake musical fans. Gatekeepers often claim superiority due to being more well versed in classical musicals, or just musicals in general. They argue that fans of only one musical, usually a modern one, aren't really musical theater fans, but just fans of that one particular musical, making those who like other musicals, but just happen to like a gateway one more, feel unwelcome. They generally dislike contemporary musicals, simply because they are too mainstream, and instead focus on the classical ones. Now, there are also hostilities from the gate enterers as well. A large number of these new musical fans bash those who like the older musicals for not appreciating modernity. So it goes both ways. This often results in the fandom circling around the same musicals, such as the aforementioned 4 musicals. There are other musicals that people claim to be circled around as well, such as Mean Girls or Hadestown, but those are more debatable. These 4 musicals, however, are universally agreed upon to be the most circled around. Of course, not everyone is like this, but there are still enough of them around. The ideal musical theater fan is open to trying out all musicals, and while they do not necessarily have to like everything they watch or listen to, the point is that they don't immediately shut it away. Despite this drama, the fandom generally gets along. Alright, now that that's out of the way, how about what makes a good musical? Since this fandom is of a media type, and not a piece of media, it makes things a lot more open to criticism. Of course, interests vary, but generally, the fandom looks for a good storyline with good characters that people can be emotionally invested in, as well as, of course, good music. Many also like musicals that are innovative or interact with the audience by addressing relevant social issues. There seems to be a bit of an overlap between the musical theater community and other book and TV fandoms. However, since the musical theater fandom is a very diverse one, not many general overlaps can be easily made. It's highly unlikely to see someone who likes anime and someone who likes historical fashion in the same place. Theater kids also tend to be more experienced in music-related things in general, such as singing. The fandom's opinions about themselves mainly center around the creativity, in terms of the content they make, and variety, in terms of the vast audience that musicals appeal to. There are a bit of complaints about toxicity, as well as the circling around the same musicals. Also, we are almost like a cult. Musical theater's most famous modern-day influence is the musical Hamilton. It stopped Alexander Hamilton from being removed from the $10 bill, which is more than what other fandoms could say. There are also several musicals that everyone knows, fans or not, such as Les Miserables, and the Phantom of the Opera, alongside the aforementioned Hamilton. Yet there are songs from many more musicals that have creeped into everyday life. Due to TikTok, many songs from musicals such as Six, Heathers, and Beetlejuice have been spread, even though most of the TikTokers don't even know it's from a musical. It's quite likely that you've encountered a reference to a musical somewhere, but just didn't know it at the time. Now, whether this is a good thing or not is entirely debatable, but one cannot deny that even though they might not be too commonly referenced, musical songs are definitely there. Musical theater is definitely growing, and even Disney is taking notice. Theater itself is an ancient art form, which makes this fandom very unique. It's a continuation of a process that has been happening for thousands of years. What I find the most fascinating about this fandom, and this is something that many within the fandom have already pointed out, is how it hasn't split apart. Musicals can be radically different from each other, and there's quite a bit of conflict. It's not a perfect fandom, and there's plenty of salt. However, the fact that there is still such a thing as a musical theater fandom is very interesting, and its development around musical theater instead of just one musical makes it very different from the rest of the internet fandoms. Now, there is a lot more about this fandom that we could talk about. I haven't even gone into the individual musical fandoms. There is a lot more. But this is just basic general overview. So, see you next time.